CEOs that are generally promoted to CEO position are not ready to be CEOs. They've been the best physician. They've been the best manager. And oftentimes they're promoted into position they're just not ready for. And so one of the things that you're talking about with regards to that gap, frankly, one of the gaps is their leadership lid that they have on themselves.
Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton. Got a special guest for you today. I have Coach John Gallagher. I cannot wait for him to get into his story behind coaching, what he's super passionate about, and just the state of the coaching industry right now. I feel like everybody has the title coach on their business card and on LinkedIn and everywhere else. Here I'm a guy who just jumped out of my big corporate job to go coaching full time. So I guess that we can deconstruct that, as my wife would say. Let's just go deep here, John. Welcome to the show.
Chris, I appreciate you having me on the show. Let me start out by saying it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate you investing the time with me. Some of the things you got going on, as I've read, you got a book coming out. Obviously, the One Hand at a Time podcast is making a difference. Some of the guests that you have on there really making a difference, and the effort and discipline you're putting in to make this happen, pretty powerful. I know you're making an impact, so that's really cool. And thanks for letting me be a small part of it. You mentioned that about coaching. I think it's so funny, just as a story to go along with that. So I was looking for johngallagher.com. And when I went to buy that domain about 3 years ago, when I decided to go into this thing on my own after leaving the corporate world myself, is that it was a DJ in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he didn't have any desire to sell his domain to me. So I had exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to be the John Gallagher. And I ended up settling on Coach John Gallagher. And then I go and do the Google search, and there is a Coach John Gallagher in college basketball as well. So I still can't get on the first page of the tour, but coaching can be something that's fun to talk about. It's very rewarding, and it's something that you're exactly right, I am pretty passionate about. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, it's like I said as in the intro there, is that the term coaching has just become something that I feel a lot of people are jumping into, maybe for the wrong reasons. I don't know. I mean, I'll kind of break down my decision to go, and then we can kind of figure out what yours was to leave that job. And for me, I had felt I reached the most people I could impact on that scale was in the company I was at. And to continue impacting more lives, which is what I really thrive on, I had to leave. I had to move on from that position where I was at for 7.5 years and go chase my dream to do something different. And it's so funny because then I see an article from Rene Rodriguez, who's a personal friend of mine. He was talking about how, be careful. There's so many people out there that call themselves coach, and they really don't know what they're doing, and they're not specialized in certain areas. So the first thing I thought was, did Rene write that for me? Because that's just how your brain works, right? I know that's not the case. Rene and I've talked through this multiple times, but I was like, Rene, are you trying to tell me, right? So, but what's your take on that? I mean, what took you from corporate America to coach? And then what do you feel the state of the coaching industry is right now?
Sure. Well, you think about my journey, and I'd love to say that it was that I just had wanting to impact more and decided to jump. In this case, for me, it was something that was a push, and it's something that I've learned over time. So COVID, I worked for a large company for a time, did coaching and consulting. So again, you want to start getting into a conversation, the difference between coach, consultant, and mentor, and all those things. But I was doing coaching at a large Big 10 company as going forward. We were a face-to-face consulting company, and I found myself doing coaching, if you will, on the side. Coaching to me was ultimately taking people to a place from a leadership standpoint in my space that they weren't really willing to go to on their own. We've got a podcast called the Uncommon Leader Podcast. So it was that uncommon component of they were a good coach leader today, but to be a great leader, they really needed to challenge themselves and go forward. Well, once our business was face-to-face for so long, COVID hit back in 2020, I was consulting in the healthcare space, and we couldn't go face-to-face anymore. We couldn't get into hospitals. We couldn't get into clinics. And so our organization rode that out for a little while. Got to the point where I'd been sitting at home for 4 or 5 months, and those big companies are not going to employ you if you're not generating revenue. And so they gave me a runway. And the idea behind coaching, interestingly enough, and the model that I use is that you start off with a dream. And I had a dream I shared with a couple bosses about 10 years prior to that and said, I'd really like to use this model in terms of coaching to impact others, to listen to people, to develop their soft skills to go along with what was really important from a business standpoint to go forward. And at that time, that boss said, hey, that's probably a good thing, but it's probably not going to work here. And I got sucked into big company security. I was nervous. I didn't want to jump and lose that health insurance and lose that regular salary that was there and all those different components until, frankly, I was given the boot and had to make a decision whether or not I wanted to get back into corporate America on a different side or really trust what my dream was and make a decision to go forward. That was something I had to do. I had a long discussion with my wife and said, we're going to go try this out. I felt like I had enough relationships in the space that you're working in. I think that's a great big part of what happens with regards to being successful at coaching is what are those relationships that you already built? Who's going to be able to introduce you to others that are going to help you to make a difference, Chris? And I think that's the power of what's happening. And I think, I've seen many guests on your show, and you and I follow the same influencers for the most part, and you get to call a few of those guys friends where I'm just getting to know them, the John Gordons and the Ben Newmans and the Ed Milets of the world. Those are the folks that really talk about, the power of one more and having confidence in attacking the process, all those different components, that it took an influence like that and really say, I was ready to try that out on my own, to have support from my wife as well to get that going. And we made that happen. That's been 3 years. And I got to tell you, I appreciate it more on that entrepreneurial side than I ever thought I would in terms of being out on my own. The freedom that is the ability to set your own schedule and to work with the people that you want to work with. It's been really cool. Now, again, I don't know if I've specifically answered your question about coaching, but ultimately that's how I ended up going through it.
Well, you definitely answered the question, but gave me more opportunities to come up with more questions as my brain works. That's just how my brain works, right?
That's how these conversations work really well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Man. So that's the great thing about my show is I literally have no questions written down. I don't look at that stuff. And if somebody doesn't like it, they can always disconnect and we can move on to the next show. So I'm not a controversial guy, so I'm not going to ask you political parties or anything like that. I do want to get into the importance of the decisions that are made because of your spouse, right? So my wife, when I came to her a year ago and I said, I think I want to leave my job and become a full-time coach. And I want to speak and I want to run my podcast. And she has been the one who's on board the whole time, literally said to me, if we had to live under a bridge to make this work, that's what I would do. So without that, if someone's listening to this call and they're thinking about leaving their cushy type of corporate job or whatever, make sure you've got a support system. If your spouse is not on board, you might want to rethink those things through because that could be a catalyst for somewhere. And my wife's like, look, everything that you really put your heart into, Chris, you've been able to succeed at some level. So what's this look like? And we spelled it out. We looked at it. We weren't sure what the right time was going to be. And as I was meeting with a group of guys in Las Vegas recently, we're sitting at a table and I'm talking about the stuff I was able to accomplish doing this 20% of the time. And when I got back from Las Vegas, I said, babe, I'm going to resign tomorrow. And there we go. So here we are, right? So I'm out here doing this now and I'm fresh on the market full time. But I want to get back to the corporate America piece, John. It's
sure.
You and I both worked in that area and in good jobs. That's not like we were in the mailroom, nothing wrong with the mailroom, but it's not like we were in a mailroom position. We had nice, successful careers. But how powerful is it now that you can say, you can't, nobody tells me what I'm worth. I can figure out what I'm worth now. Can you break for me how that feels?
Chris, I love that. It even goes into a meme that I had a friend that shared with me just 2 days ago, I believe. And it was funny as he shared through, is most corporations today are not necessarily interested, if you will, in you building your personal brand and having a personal impact. Okay, so they talk about things like share what you learn, share what you're an expert at, and things like that. But ultimately what that really means is share their latest post on LinkedIn so that folks know you work for that company. I just finished reading a book called The Authority Advantage. It's Forbes' book written by a couple of guys from Forbes who talked about that people have confidence in more of a name today in terms of the industry and what's happening inside of that industry than they do in a company. And I think, again, that comes back to that relationship piece that I'm talking about. The story that I had a podcast when I was with this company before. I had another guy, a doctor that I interviewed with, and we did a segment. We were purchased by a large company that said, yeah, you can keep doing the podcast, but we need to review everything you say first before it can go and be in there. And so you're exactly right. It's not about talking politics or faith, which is very important to me as a man, but it is having that freedom to really share your story and get to work with the individuals that you want to work with. Absolutely.
When I look at the opportunity that presents itself in the coaching arena, right, the impact I can have on people's lives and not thinking about the money portion of it, I'm not chasing dollars. That's not what I'm interested in doing. But I also know what my value is now. My value will continue to increase based off of my results. So the more people's lives I change, the more results are driven, and therefore that you can monetize that to a higher level. So I'm curious, do you do just one-on-one coaching? Are you doing group coaching? What does that look like for you?
The primary business model that I have is one-on-one coaching. But what I really primarily thrive around is working with an organization on deploying their strategic plan with the initiative. So when I think about the problem I solve, whether it's with organizations that I'm consulting with, advising them on the work that they're doing, or individuals that I'm one-on-one coaching, ultimately it's underperformance, that they're not quite getting out of their business, whether they're an entrepreneur or their life, frankly, in terms of the different types of individuals that I coach. It's not agnostic, that they would, if they had someone that would challenge them, that would hold them accountable, that would get them to think differently about who they are today. And I think when I look at that one-on-one coaching model, that's really what it's about for me. You mentioned impact. You mentioned not being about the money. The money will take care of itself, and we can talk about that, and you'll get paid for the value they provide when you change lives. I listened to a guy who actually, one of the very first times I got introduced to Ed Milet on a podcast, I was listening to Rory Vaden. And you've heard Ed say this, but Rory said, hey, you're most powerfully positioned to help the person that you used
to be.
And when you can stay focused on those individuals that you used to be in your journey from a leadership standpoint, you're going to get more. And the most powerful referral that you can get is a changed life that someone starts to talk about. Last thing I'll say on that topic, I call my coaching model the greatest story ever told, whether it's a business or whether it's an individual. And that greatest story ever told to me, the way I think about it from an impact standpoint, is when someone is asked in the future to write down the name of 5 people who've had a positive impact on your life, that someone writes your name on their list as someone who's made a difference in their life. And you don't even know about it as their coach. You don't need to know about it. All you need to know is that that's the greatest story ever told when someone writes your name on their list.
That's so good. I absolutely love that. And I'm doing some work with a guy named Taki Moore, and I don't know if you know who Taki Moore is or not, but anybody that's on here that's in the coaching industry should look him up. He helps coaches grow their business and their platforms on the group coaching level, which is something I'm really starting to focus more on because it's more scalable to impact more lives. That's the direction I'm going. But let's go back to what you're talking about, working inside corporations or companies that bring people in like us. The biggest gap there is, and I call this gap coaching, is the gap between leadership in most companies and their performers. They think that they're on the same page, but they're not. And I know this because I just left this type of role. I was the intermediary between the two leaders in the company. I was a leader, but I was with all the salespeople, right? So I spoke their language more on a daily basis than the owners of the company did. That's just how it worked. I was just there more hands-on more than they were. Nothing against them, but that's just how it works. So that just made me think also, it's like, John, there's so many companies out there that need somebody like us to come in and close that gap, right? Build a bridge, accountability, just different things. And what I know for sure is when you help these grow with their sales, they'll pay you whatever it takes. I used to do consulting in some different special events in the car industry, and they would pay me astronomical amounts of money to be there for 5 days because I would change the mindset and everything that they're doing. What is your take on that as far as that gap when you go into these companies? And it's so simple to me because it's such a breakdown in communication, but are you feeling the same way when you go into these companies to help out?
Well, I think, Chris, there's no doubt about it. Whether it's in the healthcare industry, which I've worked at for a while, and the CEOs that are generally promoted to CEO position are not ready to be CEOs. They've been the best physician. They've been the best manager. And oftentimes they're promoted into position they're just not ready for. And so one of the things that you're talking about with regards to that gap, frankly, one of the gaps is their leadership lid that they have on themselves. They've worked really hard to get where they are. They've performed. They've been the top performers. But they haven't had to be a leader and develop others to be successful in the business. And so one of the things that I identify for them really quickly is that this business, it's the hit by the bus rule. If you get hit by the bus tomorrow, what's going to happen to this business? And if it's going to fail, then you're not leading this company. You're not developing the people that need to be led. So how I end up working with the teams, not necessarily as team coaching, although I do some module coaching on different tools, but I'll coach the top leader of the organization on where their gaps are, and then I'll coach their leaders as well. And so that there's to your point, a bridge in between the two that they understand. There's confidentiality in all the coaching that's done, but there's a consistency in the approach that's being taught. So it's not one leader learning in a silo. It's a leadership team learning a set of tools together to be successful. Look, you're exactly right. What got us here won't get us there. Many times we work with smaller organizations, especially when we're a smaller coach starting out. We're probably not going to coach the top 50 companies in the organization. We might coach one of their individuals because of relationship, but we're coaching people who have built a company over up. It might be a second generation or a third generation owner that have absolutely worked their tails off to make things happen. And they're looking to retire, but they can't leave, okay, because they haven't developed the people that are ready to run the business. And so I spend a significant amount of time working with leaders to get out of working so much in the business and work on the business and developing their people so that those others can make that happen. And they can go out if they want to and buy a yacht or whatever they want to do or play golf, whatever they want to, and not worry about whether or not the business is going to be.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of working on the business and not in it. Today, I spent about 4 hours working on my coaching business and not in it. I had 0 clients today to meet with, so I literally spent multiple hours mapping out some strategies that I'm working on. So I love that. You know, I like to use the analogy when I'm talking to corporations and companies that are looking in, when they bring in somebody new into a CEO role or whatever, it's just like in football. I'm a huge football fan, right? So they bring in a head coach. What does a head coach need? Head coach needs an offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, special teams, linebacker coach, wide receiver, like all these other coaches underneath him. A head coach is not normally the people person to the players. He's not. That's right. I think that's where it's lost in companies. I'm the CEO, listen to me. Well, they're more related or feel more relatable to the guy who's just once or twice removed from the CEO, right? And then you get CEOs who have that problem of, well, I don't want to coach up this guy too much because he may take my job or he may leave. It's the most absurd thing in the world is, why wouldn't you overtrain everybody? And if they leave, they leave. I'm not going to keep anybody around who doesn't want to be part of that growth and that training. So I love that when I have a conversation with somebody who's an owner of a company or a high-level individual, let's talk about the breakdown in communication. And most people are football fans, so I can have that conversation with them. I'm sure as I expand, they're not going to be football fans. They have to understand, football.
Yeah, football, soccer, right, yeah. That round
whatever,
ball
but it's still the same. It's still a coaching tree, right? It's still supporting people and understanding that I can't be the end-all, be-all as a CEO of a company. And I think that's where most CEOs fail because they want to be friends and do this with everybody. But you're not relatable to the guy who's making $50,000 a year. You're not relatable to him. As much as you want to try, you're not. So you have to have those other people in there. Do you see the same thing, John, when you deal with, you've got to try to help that growth pattern or come up with a coaching tree internally to do that?
I absolutely do, Chris. I mean, to stay along that football analogy, Lou Holtz would say, I mean, you got to have, there's no doubt about it, the leader has got to be really strong, but he's not going to be a very good leader very long if he doesn't have good players and good coaches. Okay, good coaches can kind of win a couple games, but great coaches, look at the tree you mentioned, Nick Saban's tree, in terms of the coaches that continue to get promoted out of there. Now, I do believe you have to be able to connect with the people at all levels and be able to, in essence, manage by walking around and let them know you care and be able to communicate your vision at multiple levels in the organization. Having said that, I don't think there's any way you can possibly do that on your own. If you don't have a team that you set objectives with, give them targets, measurable targets that they can hit on a regular basis, and give them, in essence, the freedom to make that happen, but hold them accountable when they're not as well, then you're not going to be successful as a CEO. And I think that's a gap that I absolutely see. The other thing you mentioned was the word friends. Okay, you get into those small businesses and those CEOs promote their friends to positions. Then they can't hold them accountable anymore because they feel like they would break a friendship. That person is dragging the organization down where they promoted their best friend to the VP of sales and he's not performing. How do you make that change as an organization? So I'm not saying you can't work with friends. All I'm saying is you got to draw a line between, can I hold somebody accountable to the
Hey, Uncommon Leaders. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I believe in doing business with people you like and trust and not just a company name. That's why a strong personal brand is essential, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader within a company. Brand Builders Group, the folks who have been helping me refine my own personal brand, are offering a free consultation call with one of their expert brand strategists. They'll help you identify your uniqueness, craft a compelling story, and develop a step-by-step plan to elevate your impact. So head on over to CoachJohnGallagher.com/BBG, as in Brand Builders Group, to schedule your free call and take the first step toward building a personal brand that gets you noticed for all the right reasons. That's CoachJohnGallagher.com/BBG. Now, let's get back to the episode.
And you got to have results and the proper behaviors. You got to have a set of core values that you live to as an organization, because people will see right through that as well.
Yeah, I think that's another term that's used so loosely these days, core values. It's some words on the wall, and when it really comes down to it, behind the closed doors in leadership, that's a bunch of BS. So I agree. And the thing is, the people see that in the organization. They see it, they feel it, they know that what you're spewing is not exactly what's happening there. Like, I love the Ben Newman's over feelings, and I think we have to have a standard of what we do. Standards over, right? And I'm coaching a super high level realtor right now, and we're talking about this team he's putting together and how he has to create a standard of how many phone calls a day his new realtors have to make to the leads he buys. We have to have a standard. And it's not, they're going to call from 9 to 10. No, we're going to have 60 touches a day or whatever that number is. And that's the standard we lead to. Now, what I have found is dealing with people that have teams or in organizations that have never had the standard. Unfortunately, when you put the standard in place, you may have to get rid of some people because they're so used to not having the standard. Now I have to come in and say, okay, look, this is how it's going to work. This is what we're going to do. And they're going to buck it a little bit. Not about you, but I've been in situations where I go in and I run some things for a company. And then all of a sudden you see one of the guys slide through behind you in the back door, and he ends up with the CEO, and he's in there, pouting like he's a 3-year-old. So I think it comes down to the daily standards we create for our salespeople, for sure, and the accountability portion of that. But how do you navigate that when you're in a small company and it is friends, it is whoever? And every time I've got 1 or 2 guys that are going to fight me, and they're going to not, you don't know this, and they're going to go in there and run that. Has that happened to you, John?
Well, absolutely, Chris, on a regular basis. And, you're going to go into those organizations on your own, and you're going to consult with them, or you're going to go in there and say, look, what you measure, you control. What you don't measure. And right now you're accepting behaviors, you're accepting results that are acceptable. You have to make a change as a leader. You have to make a decision. I was listening to a study last night. We had our home group at the house, and one of the things Rick Warren says, everybody's got a dream. They want to be this great company. I mean, everybody really does have a dream. They want to be this great individual, this great leader. But 9 out of 10 of those individuals are not willing to make the choice that they're going to make the disciplines. And this thing from disciplines. You do 75 hard. You've instilled some incredible disciplines to make changes in your life. And, there aren't many people that are willing to do what you've done, the law of sacrifice. I want to do what that company did. Yeah, but are you willing to do what they've done to do what they do? And you have to get ready to, and that's for me, that really makes my uniqueness is the intentionality. I don't let up. You got to be a dog on a bone. Okay, when you say something like you need 60 touches a day and they do 40 touches a day, are you going to accept that? Or are you going to address that as an individual and try to get them to change their behaviors?
So the goal is not to get rid of jump on that, John. I don't normally cut my guests off, but it reminds me of a conversation I had with Ben Newman. And those of you listening, if you don't know who Ben Newman is, find out who Ben Newman is. He is Continued Fight on Instagram. But I'm on a first call ever with Ben. It's December 26th of last year. Because he messaged me and said, yeah, I'll do a call with you at 12 on December 26th. I'm like, man, I'm off the whole week after Christmas, but I'll get on with Ben Newman, right? So we're talking, and he said, hold on. I want you to understand something. When you're given something you need to get done in business, it's the same thing. Would you walk in to the Florida Gator locker room when you're playing football at Florida, and the strengths coach says, we're going to do 10 sets of 10 bench today, Chris. You're not going to tell them that you're going to do 4 sets of 5, right? You're not going to do that. So why do you do that in your personal and your business life? Why do we do that? Why do we put up with that? I'm glad people do, because that gives us more opportunities to coach them. First of all.
That's right. Exactly right. That's what makes this industry, and you said it at the very start, there's such a need because there's such a gap between where they are today and where they need to go.
Yeah, and it's I find it really frustrating in this way, because I've always been somebody who puts forth a ton of effort, and I've been in leadership and running car dealerships from the time I was 19 years old. I just expect everybody else to do what I do, and I thought that was normal. But the older I got, I realized that most people are just okay with doing nothing. So the call I was on today was talking about, John, and this is a question for you on the coaching side, how do you address a client that probably just isn't a good fit for you? I'm sure you fired clients. I've fired clients. I'm just curious, what does that look like, and how do you make a decision if they're a good fit for the best story told? How do you decide that?
No, it's a great question, Chris, and it's one that, while I've been on the journey early enough, I've probably not had the ability to make all those choices at the start. We don't get to choose all of the players that we want to, but I really try to line it up right on the front end in terms of what the expectation is. When you set up a system like we're going to do 2 coaching calls a month, and you don't get to change those calls, you might be nice enough to change, especially when they're CEOs. They're going to have some challenge. but are they willing to hit that discipline really early? And then we do formal quarterly reviews reflecting what's going well and what isn't going well, what could be going better with regards to going through that with the client, saying and asking them, what do I need to do different as a coach? We've got it right in the paperwork. You can make a change. You can stop it, whenever you want to. There's no hard feelings. There's nothing. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Having said that, I've had about a 95% renewal rate with regards to that. And the only ones that have changed so far, and it's not about me, I think it is about the process that they go through, is that they're retiring. And they just decide, they're not using that as business coaching. They don't have that investment for them anymore. But I think that's important on the front end to outline, almost sliding that paper across the table and says, are you willing to do the things that are in this checklist? Are you willing to meet with me for an hour twice a month on phone calls and then an hour or two of homework and do the action plans that are really waiting to be done? Because if you're not willing to do that, you're wasting both of our time. You're wasting your money and your time, and you're wasting my time as well to be able to work with someone who can create that story. Now, it might be that I've been fortunate enough to have the relationships that allow me to not to have to do that very much so far, but I know that time's coming. I know that time's coming where I'm going to have to fire a client. In the days of the big company world, absolutely we had to do that when folks weren't changing because they're looking to us for ROI. They're going to come to us the first time that it is struggling just a little bit and say, where's the return on my investment? I have a story. There's an organization prior to starting on my own, but they asked us, they said, are you willing to guarantee your coaching results for our organization? While I didn't say it, my partner said, as we were standing there, said, absolutely, I'll guarantee it. I'll guarantee we'll get you results. And the partner said, are you willing to let us run your business then? He's like, no, I'm not that. I said, well, then I can't guarantee your business because there's going to be a time when you say, just like your exercise analogy in the Florida locker room, you're going to tell me you're not going to do something that I told you you need to do. That's going to come the time to say, I don't know that I can help you anymore.
Yeah, I think that's powerful to be able to back that up and understand. I did have one client. I've only had one client ever ask me, what's your guarantee? I'm like, my guarantee is I'm going to show up on every coaching call and be ready to bring you something of value. And if you don't think it's a value, then we'll reevaluate and maybe move on to something else. And he's become one of my best clients. So, it's so funny when people start asking guarantees. And here's my whole process behind that. It's the same thing in the mortgage industry when they ask you, John, what's your rate? You know why they ask you that? Because they don't know what else to ask you. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't take offense to someone saying. Now, I love something that I learned from Rene Rodriguez when people ask you, what's your price? And he always responds, your price to hire me or to not hire me? And it's a powerful statement, right? Like, so my price is a price. But if you don't hire me, you're going to continue getting the results that drove you to get on this phone call with me right now, right? So I think that coaching is super important. I'm coached. I have a personal coach, business coach who takes care of me. That's Adam Roach. I also do a bunch of one-on-one stuff with Ben Newman, and then I do some group stuff with Ben. I think you and I were on the same call recently with Ben, but Ben and I have been able to do some really cool one-on-one things, and actually I'm going to spend some time with him next week. He's coming to Orlando, and he's become a mentor for me, right? And now I've got Taki Moore, who I'm doing some stuff with, who's super high level. And I share that with people because I'm not trying to impress them or anything else, but I'm letting you know that as a coach, I'm coached, right? I believe in what it is. And I'm on a group coaching call the other day with a bunch of other coaches, and some of them were new to the industry. And I said, okay, well, how many of you are coached? And about 60% of them were. And I said, here's my opinion. If you're not coached, you need to get off the call right now. And some of them got offended. I'm like, how can you ask someone to commit to you if you're not getting advice as well? Are you the end all be all? Do you know everything there is to know about the world? Because if you are, then I want to know. But what's your take on that as far as coaching and a coach being coached and everything else?
Chris, I think you're spot on. So I have two coaches. Well, I have a coach and a mentor. I have a coach that I work with on a monthly basis on the branding side of the business and working on the strategy going forward. And I have a mentor who's ultimately there. And I see the difference in the mentor and the coach mostly being experience. Mm-hmm. That mentor is someone who's experienced many of the things that I'm doing. And he also makes a great coach because he challenges me. He inspires me. He encourages me. A lot of stories with him. And I believe that. And it's not about the business, by the way. The story for me was back in 2017 when I had tried so hard to really work my own fitness journey and to make that work, Chris. And it wasn't happening. I said, I think I need a coach. I need a trainer to help me get better in this space, that I need someone to teach me what I need to do from an exercise and nutrition standpoint. And it was January 11th, 2017. I walked into that gym and Margot was there. And I ended up about 3 years later in Men's Health magazine with regards to that transformation that was there. But I had a full-time trainer basically for 3 years to help me on my fitness journey. Okay, if you're looking to grow yourself from a spiritual standpoint, you need a mentor or a coach to grow your faith. I absolutely agree with you 100% that if you are going to be a coach of some sort or any type of leader, that you need a coach. I mean, Jim Rohn talks about you're the average of the 5 people that you're so closely associated with. If you're the smartest person in the room, you need to get a new room, right? I mean, there's a lot of different cliches that go along with that, but we need to continuously grow. It's a lifelong learning journey. And if we're going to preach that to others, you're absolutely right. Why wouldn't we live that on our own? I would want to know when I'm interviewing a coach, who coaches you? It's a great question to ask, right? It's like Renee's question, cost of hiring.
I talk a lot about that. I go to a lot of events. I invest in myself. I get in rooms that Chris Welton probably didn't belong in at some point, right? And you know the story behind the Jordan, and I've been able to use the Jordan to leverage that to get in these rooms with people or get on phone calls with people that people dream about connecting with, right? But the difference for me there is I don't look at it as one phone call. Like I got some numbers in my phone, John, that I could probably sell for a lot of money on the internet. Would never do that. But I can text certain people and they respond to me like, you know, high level individuals and they like that, right? Like I've become really good friends with a guy named Damon West. I don't know if you know who Damon West is or not, but absolutely. Damon's in Orlando right now.
Coffee bean.
Yeah, and we were on the phone last night chatting because we were trying to get together while he was in town, and we just weren't able to make it work. Like I had something come up this morning where we couldn't meet, but I sent him one Jordan, John. That's how I met him. And then we spoke on the same stage in November last year, and we just become friends ever since, right? So I share that with people because I want you to understand that a lot of people that you want to connect with are available, and they will talk to you and have conversations with you. David Meltzer's another guy. And if anybody doesn't know who David is, look him up. Super high level individual. If you've seen the movie Jerry Maguire, okay, that's about his company, right? So
okay.
Yeah, but he's very easy to get in touch with. I won Jordan him as well, and then met him in Las Vegas in person. But the thing is that figure out who you want to be in this space and then find as many people as you can that are doing the little things that you want to do. So I just pull a little bit from this guy and a little bit from this guy because I'm not going to be Rene Rodriguez. I'm not going to be John Gordon. I'm not going to be John Gallagher. I'm Chris Welton. And people know me as one hand at a time. That's who I am. But if I can take a little bit from this guy, a little bit from that guy, and it makes me a better person and I can impact, let's do it, dude. Let's do it. So
Chris, I love the creativity that you have in making that happen. And I love, again, those individuals aren't replying back if you're not changing as a result of what they talk to you about as well. Okay, you're making an investment in them on the front end, but what they really want to know is that they're changing a life and they're changing your life. And they can see that you're improving. They can see that they're having an impact. So they are going to get back with you. Those are the ones that you get back with. The ones that aren't going to do, they just want to take. Okay, they just want to hear from you. They just want to take. They're not going to get back in touch with you. So they see that you give. They see that you're giving back to others what you're learning as well. So I think you should, absolutely be. For me, you see them behind me. I'm a voracious reader when it comes to personal development. I've always got a couple of books going on. And, if I can pick one piece from that generally, and then I love to call them after I'm done and say, hey, would you be, on the podcast or would you chat with me? Jeff Henderson, who wrote the book, What to Do Next, he put in the back of his book his cell phone number. He says, get in touch with me. So I did. I gave him a call and we've been, I don't want to say, again, I'll stop short of saying friends, but he's been on the podcast.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, want to watch the full episode? Head over to the One Hand at a Time podcast, links in the description below. In that conversation, I share my continued journey, the lessons I've learned, and what it truly means to lead with purpose. I hope it inspires you to become the uncommon leader you're meant to be. Keep growing, keep leading, and always remember, you're your own growing champion.